Thanks for joining us. I'm Tom Buller here with the Kansas Rural Center. I'm really excited about our views from the field today. We'll be talking about mental health on the farm. Special thanks to our staff member, Leslie Montee, who organized today's session. So I'm going to pass it over to her and let her take the lead here. Without further ado, you ready, Leslie?
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I am Leslie Montee, Farm Business Navigator here at the Rural Center. My job is to provide navigation services in support of all farm entrepreneurs, small ag businesses across Kansas. My work mostly involves identifying barriers that our farmers, ranchers, and growers face, and trying to help to find them the kind of support they need. From there, helping provide guidance towards the right resources to strengthen their operations and their businesses. So at the Rural Center, we don't just focus on a farmer's yield. We want the farmers to be successful, not just farmers, but successful, happy people with thriving families and futures. And I think mental health is a big part of that. And it, again, easily can be overlooked. Research from the Rural Health Association shows that farmers are 3.5 times more likely to die by suicide than the general population. And that's kind of a scary number when you think about it, in large terms. Farmers face a wide range of distinct pressures from fluctuating markets, land payments, planning for the next generation. There's so many things that are out of their control, and coping with that can be pretty challenging, I would assume. Signs of stress that come with those burdens, they can be unnoticed, easily pushed aside, and in the end, they take a toll on your overall health. And in many areas, rural areas, isolation, stigma, limited mental health support, it can make it even harder for farmers to address these concerns. So we've been talking at the Rural Center about what we can do to help in that area as well, and not just help with business. So in order to help bridge that gap, we have invited Thomas Eisenbarth to join us today. Thomas is a fifth generation Kansan, an ag educator, a farmer himself, and he's launched his own initiative focusing on strengthening mental health among this population. So Thomas and I are kind of going to have a conversation style back and forth Q&A, pretty casual. And if anyone wants to ask a question, feel free to maybe drop something in the chat, or you can kind of just jump in. But we will have some time at the end. If anybody has questions, we can do a Q&A there. But with that, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Thomas, could you share the moment or experience that first opened your eyes to the importance of rural health in mental health in rural communities?
Yep, absolutely. So, growing up, I grew up on a cow calf operation in Northeast Kansas, and I was 3 years old when I had an uncle make a permanent decision. And having something like that in your childhood, and just kind of watching how that affected my childhood and my upbringing, and just kind of that general attitude in a small town, just we don't talk about it, right? It was almost like it didn't happen through my childhood. Like we just don't talk about those type of things. So growing up with that attitude of just work hard, grit, stuff it away. We don't talk about emotions. We don't feel emotions. Emotions are scary, but kind of growing up in that manner that a lot of us probably have. And then fast forwarding to uh, 4 years ago now, my generation almost had a repeat of the same type of situation. Thankfully, that didn't happen, but it was handled the exact same way, right? We don't talk about it, like we just move on. And then fast forward another few years, I kind of ran into some things in life, and I said enough. I said we're going to talk about it, and we're going to deal with it. And I made a tough decision to seek out therapy. And that is something that is kind of taboo, uh, kind of scary in the ag world, I guess you would say. But I made that decision to seek out therapy, ask for help, and get some things figured out. So going through all that and then learning so many things about myself and emotions and just some basic tools for your toolbox through that therapy journey has been really, really helpful as well.
Great. So that's your kind of personal journey that you've been on, and then that's what led you to start Grounded Ag.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. I remember even my first couple sessions of therapy, I was like, it just made a lot of sense to me. Some different, just basic tools we were talking about. But it also really struck me how opposite the two worlds are. Where on one end, you have therapy, wellness, taking care of yourself. And on the other end is the traditional farming and ranching attitude of work yourself into the ground, don't sleep, don't eat. Like, we got things to do, hay to put up, cattle to take care of, crops to grow. Like, we just don't have time for that type of thing. So I've really taken it upon myself to try and figure out maybe like a language or a translation between the two worlds. Because I think obviously therapy and like the mental wellness side and like the emotional resilience side, it can be blended into farm life, but they're, like I said, they're just two completely opposite worlds. So that's been the main focus of my work, is trying to translate between the two worlds.
so you named it Grounded Ag. Does that name have a meaning to you specifically behind it?
Obviously, in the ag world, like the ground where the crops grow, I mean, where all life comes from. But in the therapy world, if we're looking at our nervous system, if we're looking about how we're taking care of ourselves, grounded means so much in that world. Just like nervous system regulation and just being a grounded individual, being comfortable with who you are, being able to handle your emotions and handle yourself, just being a grounded individual. And that was kind of a big goal of mine, was to be able to be a grounded individual.
So you kind of took a big step out and you started sharing this story, which I know you're an educator, so you're used to talking in front of people. It's not a big deal, but this is kind of a different issue. What surprised you the most as you started telling this particular story publicly?
I don't know if it was a surprise, but I really appreciate humor in my life too. And I remember being in the gas station after those first couple therapy meetings, and we all know how word can travel in a small town. But a couple of the older guys, they said, "You go to therapy now?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do. Like, I'm getting help and taking care of some things." And they were like, "So do you have to lay on a couch? Like, did they shove things in your head like a lobotomy?" And I was like, "No, absolutely not." But it did kind of catch me off guard, like how taboo and the stigma that still exists about simply getting help. So that was a big surprise. But through the Grounded Initiative, the thing that has really surprised me is the general, like, open mindedness and the open arms approach that the ag industry has actually had towards this issue. It just seems like even just the last few months, like, there's buzz around it and people are talking and people are taking it pretty seriously. So that part really did surprise me, because I knew, like, starting out, that it was going to be a tough barrier to crack to be able to have these types of conversations in this industry. But it's really surprised me in a good way about how well this is caught on and how serious people are taking this.
From your perspective, what do you think is the biggest mental health challenge that farmers are facing right now?
I still think it's just, yeah, just farm life, that we're busy and we have families to feed, crops to grow, cattle to take care of. And I think the time, like, just simply having the time to drive half an hour to a therapist's office or to a rural healthcare setting, and it's just too easy to brush away in the grand scheme of things, because there's so many things on your mind as a producer, that unfortunately, like, taking care of yourself and keeping your mind straight, it kind of gets put on the back burner. So I think just simply the time, probably more than anything else.
Where do you see the deepest disconnect between mental health resources and the people who really need them?
Like I was talking about being a translator between the two worlds. Farmer language is just a language all its own. And I think, unfortunately, therapists and doctors kind of get a bad rap in rural America. And it's not fair at all because everybody's here to help. But I think there's just a certain language that farmers speak and just a certain attitude that you have to come at this with that hopefully we can kind of figure out how to blend and turn all of this wellness and all of the therapy language. If we can convert that to farmer and rancher language, I think that's going to help a lot.
Is that something that you have found to be more successful for you since you kind of could speak both languages? Like, do you think people are a little more
Right.
receptive to you?
Yeah, and it's just more of a natural thing because farmers have their own, we'll call it the cattle path of the day, where they just have their own natural tendencies to where it's to the coffee shop or to the bank to talk to their loan officer or the crop insurance office or to the co-op. Like they just naturally end up in places that I'm also naturally at being a producer. So I think that helps a lot too, where there's just something scary. I don't know if it's scary or just like the doctor's office and the therapist's office. It's just not where farmers usually end up or want to end up. So just kind of being in the same place at the same time and speaking the same language, I think has been really advantageous to at least kind of get the word out and start the ripple effect.
Okay. And in your initiative, it's referred to as the V squared framework. Can you explain that, how it works and how it resonates in the agricultural communities?
Yep, absolutely. So farmers and ranchers, as we all know, as far as communication, checking on one another, we usually just don't talk. And if we do, we're talking about weather, talking about crops. So just like anything else, if we're starting something new where we're talking about these kinds of tough issues, in order to kind of start the conversations, it's going to be tough and it's going to be uncomfortable. But if we can just remember V squared being validating, like, hey, I'm living this life too, and it is tough. We're fighting the weather, we're fighting the markets, we're fighting all of it. Like the way that you feel right now, if you're struggling, it is okay. Like you are human and this is hard. So the validation piece. And then the second V is the vulnerability piece. Like, hey, you're not alone in this. Like I have struggled before. Like I think we all struggle at one point or another, but just know that you're not alone in this. So the validation piece and the vulnerability piece are going to be two pretty key parts of just the basic structure of how to start those conversations. Because, like I said, they're going to be uncomfortable. They're not natural. We talk about the weather, we talk about markets, we talk about corn yield. Those things are natural conversations in farm life. But these other tougher issues that we all know they're there, but to actually verbalize and check on one another, the validation and the vulnerability are going to be great places to start to try and have those conversations.
And you mentioned creating a safe culture. What does that look like on a farm or a ranch or a rural workplace, and how do we begin to build that?
I think it's those two key pieces, the validation and the vulnerability, because everywhere we see it, like if you're struggling, reach out for help. Like we have the different phone numbers you can call for help. Like reach out if you're struggling. Excuse me. But if you're on the receiving end of that, like if you ask somebody, like, are you okay? Like, are you struggling? And when they do respond and they say, no, I'm not okay, like I have been struggling, we need to be able to receive that in a safe way. Because if we botch that conversation and if we don't handle that well, then that person may not feel safe enough to reach out again if they need to. So it goes back to that V squared piece to where we need to make sure that if someone is brave enough to ask out for help, that the receiving end is a safe place to be to.
So if someone were to reach out What's one skill that you think someone in the audience could be able to use immediately?
Uh, to just be able to have basic empathy and understanding of the person that is struggling. Like I always encourage people, like if you feel like the other person's in danger, then you need to reach out to the appropriate resources and get them help. But my hope is always to try and just check on people and catch people before it would get to that point, to where just basic connection and some other simple things could help that person out. So just basic empathy, I think, and understanding of how tough farm life is would go a long ways.
And in the ag world, there's a lot of talk about a generational gap. How do you think that's showing up in mental wellness?
I think, and we're all tired of talking about it. We were just talking about it before we came on, but COVID, just the social and emotional things that certain age groups just simply missed out on during COVID, that certain skills just weren't picked up and weren't adapted. But I always think about like my grandpa and how he just handled things and the way he went about his business versus, I don't know, an 18, 19-year old with a cell phone, and just life is so much faster. So it's going to be imperative, I think, to the ag economy as a whole in the state of Kansas to try and get the 18-year-old and the 65-year-old to try and come to some kind of understanding and understand why each person is the way they are. I think that's going to be huge as far as being able to work together. But the mental wellness piece, the two generations or even three generations, if we're looking at, I don't know, transitioning assets and just continuing this way of life, there's going to have to be some intentional compromise and understanding from both sides to try and, like I said, transition assets and continue this way of life. But the two generations apart or three generations apart are just so vastly different. And it's all technology, and the world has gotten so much faster. But we're all still, I mean, farmers and ranchers, and we still have a love for the land and a love for animals. So trying to find any common ground like that that we can to connect on is going to be a great start.
Okay. If you could fix one generational barrier tomorrow, which one would make the biggest impact?
Um, Simply having conversations. So the 18-year-old, if he's looking at his 70-year-old grandpa, and there's going to be some transitions happening soon, both parties being able to have those tough emotional conversations is going to be imperative, because I'm living proof of it. If you don't talk about things and if you don't kind of figure things out, it's a struggle. So simply being able to sit down and connect over things you have in common and just talk to each other is going to be the biggest hurdle to get over, I think.
Okay. I think we've got a question from the audience.
Yep. What do we got?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, you mentioned language, and clearly, culturally, that is a major struggle all of the time. And then, of course, the agricultural community being so physically separate and has a different set of responsibilities, different timelines, different communities. It's a special problem, the language is. And one of the things that I noticed, having taught high school and worked in a variety of corporate situations, is how little people, time again, time, take the time to ask each other, what do you mean when you use the word? And then really give that word, you know, sharing and interaction so you can get understanding about the similarities and the differences in what's going on in here when we say things to each other. Because that's got to be particularly difficult for anybody who's experienced abuse.
Yep. So if we started from someone that's been through abuse, I mean, that's a whole nother ball of wax. But just to completely agree with what you're saying, we're the most connected we've ever been as a society, but we're the most disconnected we've ever been as a society. It's gonna take some intentional, like, slowing down and almost coming to a halt and having that conversation. Like, are you doing okay? Like, where are your struggles and different things like that? Like what you were saying, like almost deep diving thoughts and language, and like, are you okay? Are you struggling? So yes, intentionality is going to have to be a big piece of this.
I agree. I'm looking forward. I think a lot of people are seeing that, but how to, how to make it, how to do it. We need, I don't know what the context is in which we figure out how to do it. I mean, obviously we got Zoom and all of that, but the other problems like time and the demands that you have to meet yet today with, all of that. How do we just drop everything and do what needs to be done? Like,
Right. And it kind of that the validation and the vulnerability piece. Like, if you've only got 10 or 15, 20 seconds to check in with somebody, validating them and then being vulnerable are going to be two great places to start. It's an easy way to connect. Yes.
yeah. And teachers recognize that because you always start with what works in, like whatever the answer to a question or a written thing or any kind of project like that. You always start with what works, and that to validate that they did something meaningful.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Validation of abilities.
I just wanted to mention too, I think it's important to remember that in addition to physical abuse, there's verbal abuse and emotional abuse. And so I had to learn those the hard way. That yes, verbal and certainly emotional abuse are real and can
Mm.
affect
Yep.
people.
Yep. And then if you stack all the other stressors from farm life, it can snowball pretty quickly.
Yeah, thank you for that, Thomas. That's what I was thinking, because even just normal, quote unquote, normal, quote unquote, healthy people have things that didn't work in their lives, and nobody gives them time to admit that and then figure out what do you do. You just thinking about it doesn't stop it or change it.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. We're going to move on with our questions. But feel free to jump back in if you have anything else. You can drop it in the chat or raise your hand. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But so looking at some community level solutions, what role do you think rural neighbors, churches, co-ops, and other organizations could play in supporting mental health?
So just having a basic understanding, which in a small town most do, but just having a basic understanding of the stressors that farmers and ranchers face every day. And I always want to give a plug and a shout out to the rural healthcare system, because they're making great strides in understanding what's going on. And they're a vital piece of all of our communities. But there's so many other touch points that farmers come across, like a school or a church, crop insurance agent, their ag loan, their banker, the co-op manager. So trying to get all those different touch points of a farmer's daily life on board and understanding like those structured conversations. So it's vital that all of those daily touch points are on the same page.
Do you think that's something that's in the works or happening or that might in the future?
If I have any say in it, yes. Like, that is the driving force of what I'm trying to do, is all the daily touch points that a farmer or rancher would have on a daily basis, to where wherever their safe space is, because farmers, whether they want to admit it or not, they do have safe spaces, whether it's the coffee shop or their crop insurance agent's office. Like, those safe spots exist, But if they were to be struggling, that they would feel safe enough to say, hey, Mr. Crop Insurance Agent, I'm not feeling like myself. I feel kind of off. I'm kind of down. And then the crop insurance agent would have the basic understanding of how to respond to that, would be my works and my goals. That's what I'm working on.
Awesome. I think that's a good plan.
For all that there is that I could say about social media that I really think is dangerous and damaging, depending upon who you are as a person and the way that you use it, and then the types of circles of friends that I do see where people put up memes that are basically like, I don't like the word bullet points, but they reduce like a process that for communicating about something, or hints or suggestions about it's lots of stuff like eating healthy, how to talk to difficult people in your family. I see lots of that stuff, and I don't, I don't think that there is like a single answer that, it depends upon the people who are trying to connect to one another. But I was wondering, Thomas, if grounded ag is it I to me it's like if there were a way to saying to a person, if how about this as a starting point, that little capsulized, this is so that they don't have to be like worried about what your motives are, that if you're just really want to do this, ask, talk and have a conversation, that there's a little bit of material like that that you can refer to say, this is the orientation that I am in, and the other person is the one who gets to choose what happens.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of why I picked V squared. It's quick and it's easy to remember, and it works in about any kind of conversation that you're trying to connect to another person.
What would you say one small step that every rural household could take to improve emotional safety? Like, what's one small realistic step that we could all take?
I think it's just modeling that intentionality. I mean, you're spending half the day working fall calves, and then you've got harvest to finish and hydrants to put down, and every day is just so full. But even carving out just 10 or 15 minutes, whether it's around a dinner table or just a small check in with everybody, like just that intentional moment of how is everybody getting along? Like, just, and it doesn't take much. It doesn't have to be a 3 hour conversation, but just small check ins and being so almost painfully intentional about just checking on your people, whether it's family, neighbors, just checking on people.
So most of mental health, that's done in like a hospital setting or an office or something like that. Um, how do we bring that out of that sort of formal setting and onto the farm itself?
Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm trying to figure out daily, is how I can blend the two worlds and kind of morph the two languages into one. But I think the first step, and we're getting there, is simply talking, simply having conversations, having these type of webinars, just getting the conversation going. Because it's not new, but to the ag world, it is fairly new as far as being comfortable talking about stress, talking about some tougher subjects. So we're going to learn as we go, but it starts with just simply having conversations and just talking about it is, I think, kind of the stage that we're at right now.
So far you've worked with schools, universities, Farm Bureau, now, KRC. What do you see as the next frontier for rural health support?
I think, and I've said it a million times already, but just bridging the gap between healthcare and farm life, because healthcare, they're putting in a lot of work on it, like I said, but actually getting that information, boots on the ground, to the farmer, to the ranchers, front steps is where it needs to end up. And I think it all depends on language and how we explain things and how we talk about things.
So big picture, 10 years from now, what do you think an effective rural mental health system might look like?
Somewhere where farmers would feel safe enough and brave enough, and knowing that the receiving end is going to be safe, that they could drive to their neighbor's house, they could stop their local pastor, they could walk into a bank and find their safe space and say, hey, I'm not sleeping very well. I've kind of quit eating for the last few days. I just feel off. I don't feel like myself. Can you please help me? Will you listen? And can you please help me? And we're getting there, but I think that conversation would still be fairly uncomfortable. But I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, and I always picture about what their lives will look like as young adults. And I would hope that if any of them did have any struggles in life or just stress, that they would feel comfortable, whether it was me or anyone in their immediate circle, that they would feel comfortable enough and safe enough and not be embarrassed and not be ashamed of talking about whether they're struggling or not, but then still feeling like competent producers.
How do you stay grounded while you're doing this heavy emotional work?
The thing that about myself, and I would tell it to everyone else too, even if you're not struggling, being painfully intentional about your sleep. Getting my sleep kind of regulated and figured out has been absolutely vital. And it's been earth shattering, the difference between a rested Thomas and a tired 1 or 2 hours of sleep Thomas. Because I think all farmers and ranchers have that in common. When you lay down at night, did I close that gate? Did I make that payment? What are the markets going to do overnight? There's a rainstorm coming in next week, and I don't feel like I've got enough done. The neighbors down the road bought another quarter section. They're going to run me out. Like, just a million things can run through your mind, and it's too easy to let your sleep get out of whack. So being intentional about your sleep, and I've been extremely intentional about mine, has been really important through this work.
What message do you wish every Kansas farmer could hear right now?
That you're not crazy, you're not out of whack, you're not any of these things if you're feeling off. If you're feeling off, it means you're a human doing the best that you can, and you're trying to make a living in the most uncontrollable way possible. A big part of this is you want to maintain control seed placement, control yield, control calving dates. Like, the word control in agriculture is agriculture, but it's everything is out of our control. So if you're feeling off, if you're not feeling like yourself, it is okay, because you are human. And then you're not the only one that's ever felt like this either. So don't feel like you're alone or isolated feeling that way either.
Okay. Those are all the structured questions that I have. If anybody has any questions, you can feel free to throw them out now, or if you had something else you wanted to add that we didn't touch on, now would be a good time for that. Sherry?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thomas, thank you so
Yep.
much. Yeah, how can I help to boost what you are doing? I am a politician who is running for House District 14, and this is a very important topic for a lot of our excuse me, rural farmers in Johnson County. And so I just want to do what I can. I'm also a licensed professional counselor. How can I help to boost what you're doing with grounded agriculture? Do you have a website? Do you have a newsletter? again, how can I support you the best to get this information out?
I am on Facebook. My Facebook is simply Grounded Ag. But what I've been telling people lately, I picture it as a big ripple effect. And the quickest and the most efficient way, like the quicker I can get to people that need this information, the better. And so what I've really been seeing are like uh, farmer appreciation suppers, like Farm Bureau or other county level like meetings or suppers, just any of that stuff. I would be more than happy to come talk at and just keep this ripple effect going. So if you wanted to just shoot me a private message on my Grounded Ag Facebook page, and we can
Sure.
talk about all those different opportunities. And like I said, just get what I'm working on, just get it to those who need it the most. And like I said, it's been public speaking for now.
Okay. I appreciate everything you're doing. Like I said, the stigma, I've been a therapist for over 32 years, from Salina, from Hayes area.
Mm-hmm.
So I get it. I get what the working yourself to death. That's definitely how I think my family mantra was for probably 5 generations. So Thomas, just thank you. Thank you so much for all you do. And I will private message you and I will look at your information on Facebook. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. And it looked like Leslie, did you put my email? You just listed my email too. So that's my email that I work with. So
Yeah, and then we've got another question here. Are you doing any work or analyzing the effects on the next generation, such as your children? Are you trying to develop programs for them that will end the stigma of not wanting to talk to anyone?
yep. So my other job right now, I'm a community college instructor, and most of my kids, my students are 17, 18 years old. So I'm constantly picking their brain and just getting kind of their opinions and just a view of life in their shoes because they are the next generation coming up. So data and analytics is always important, but right now it's kind of tough at that stage. But I've been working on some other projects about actually taking survey data as far as like that age group and just kind of their struggles and their nuances because their struggles are going to be completely different from mine, that are also going to be completely different from my dad's and my grandpa's. And but just setting aside all biases and coming at it with curious energy is really important. But yes, I'm constantly picking young people's brains about their struggles and their stresses because like I said, it's completely different from mine. So
Kind of on that note, I'm curious. I have the impression just out in the world that younger people younger than me are more comfortable talking about mental health or like, if they've been in therapy. Was that kind of part of that generation gap you were talking about earlier, or are there other things, that we need to think about in bridging that gap?
yeah, that would be the best example probably because I don't know, I consider myself a blend of both worlds because like the way my dad operates and the way my grandpa operated, like that was kind of the norm growing up. But then kind of on the other side of the coin, I'm around young people every day and I'm kind of seeing what they're calling quote unquote normal. But that would be a great example, just willingness to open up. Other examples, and it depends which age group you ask, but just different opinions about work life balance, about just what they're comfortable sharing and different things like that. I mean, the list goes on and on about generational gap type things, but because I noticed it too, like work in the older generation, and now like people my age, people younger, and it's a good thing, but just being more present, maybe like the work life balance type thing. I see that a lot too. Just priorities kind of shifting, maybe.
I wonder if it would help if we would have a discussion in regards to work-life balance, for instance, what it is that we think of as fun or play, that a lot about our lives tracks us into ways that are supposed to function as fun, but probably because of, past assumptions and things, and then all of the current pressures, the fun is not so fun anymore. And so the help that can give a person in getting their balance back, through play. I think pickleball got turned into this big thing because suddenly here were all these adults who were playing what looked like a pretty, you know, simple game, and it turned into a big social thing. And it makes me wonder, if we need to remember what's fun and how to have it, and what that would do for people who are not able to, can't make the connections because they're too bound up. If maybe they need more fun in their lives.
Yeah, or just a quick smile and a laugh once in a while. It goes a long ways.
Something I did discover just recently, I happened across a thing that was happening at our high school, one of our high schools here in Olathe, and it was, I'm a retired high school teacher, and also I have done corporate work too. But I went to that, and I haven't done anything like that for decades. But it was a great little event where they actually had it set up, and you were paired up with a couple of students, and we played games together, little, those little party games that you see that you can do in 10 minutes, and it creates conversation. And I think that, if there were more situations like that in our churches and community centers, and places where people have become, isolated, if they could connect that way and just, see that other people are strangers you don't even know are okay, and they're pretty nice people, and you can laugh together. And that happened just from looking at that high school calendar, and I saw that, so I went to it. And it was something I never done before.
Yep, good deal.
I- I'm wondering a little bit more about your V squared. I'm curious how you came up with that. It's real catchy. It's easy for me to remember, so I like that. But I'm curious, like where those two V's came from, or what inspired you to come up with that.
Yep. I have a personal rule. Anybody around me that is struggling, that no matter the hour, no matter the day, load them up in my truck and we just drive around, play some music, and just talk. But I learned a lot of things about myself and how those conversations flow the best and flow well. And I really sat down and I studied a lot of those conversations, the conversations that went well and that were really helpful. And those were the two things that really stood out about every single one of those conversations is I just naturally validated what they were going through. And then I was vulnerable kind of with some different stories about things that I had been through. So it really was kind of a pure happy accident, but I spent a lot of intentional time laying in bed at night studying those conversations. And those were the two things that really stuck out to me.
How about our opportunities to ask one another questions? That's something else that you don't do, not even with people who are close around you. You're allowed to ask certain kinds of questions, and other kind of questions, if you ask them, you're in trouble. So that problem, it's a context problem a lot, I think, because we're always so on the go. But like discovering what our questions are, and the person who's having trouble or has a bad background or has been harmed, you know, do they get a chance to discover what their own questions are?
Yeah, the way that you ask the questions is very important as well. For the most part, if they know that you're coming at it with genuine empathy and genuine care,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a worry to have, but like
Yeah.
situations, I always know that I'm coming at it with empathy and care. So kind of it flows very easily for me anyway. Just the way and the energy that you ask the questions.
Yeah. And to admit what I don't know.
Yeah.
Be humble enough that they understand my question is from ignorance. Not because I'm trying to, you know, form them somehow. As they just, I don't know.
Yep, absolutely.
Something I always notice, or I've noticed it a lot recently, is like, you're in public and you see someone and you always just have that like, hey, how are you? Good, how are you? And like, it's just automatic. It just comes out of like, even if you're walking with crutches and a broken leg, you're like, good, how are you? Like,
Oh,
it just
okay.
comes out.
I'm,
Like,
yep, I'm fine.
Yeah.
yeah,
But it's a sobering moment when you ask that question just out of habit and someone actually stops you and they're like, hey, I'm actually not doing okay. Like I'm struggling a little bit. Then you're like, oh, like whether I meant to ask or not, like now here we are. So
yeah.
And it's not a weakness to admit that, you've been harmed. We're all supposed to, that thing that, hey, how are you? Oh, I'm fine. We're all supposed to just, that's a good personality trait to just keep going forward and be, strong. And then you believe that yourself, I think,
to be
that,
fair, I always think about my grandpa. Like he was raised by people that survived the Depression. He survived the 50s. He survived the 80s. That attitude got him through a lot of
yeah,
stuff. Like, I'm fine. I'm good. Let's just work. I can outwork this. I can work hard and we'll get through this. So
yeah.
I don't want to discount that either because there's a reason for all that. Like, that got him through and it saved some farms and kind of provided for some things. But, like, I don't want to discount that way that attitude came about either.
Yeah, people like that were many of our parents.
Right.
That yeah, that's you're talking about my mom, southeastern Kansas. you know, my father was out of rural Arkansas in Oklahoma. That that's the way they all were, many of them. So that's what they taught me.
Yep.
And then how you become aware of that is that you have to suffer somehow. You don't just realize that it's a mistake. It's really a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Thomas, do you want to share any future speaking engagements that you have coming up if people have them in their area and want to come out and see you?
K-State's been doing an awesome job with their ag profitability conferences across the state. I think they've even kind of joined forces with obviously the ag econ department and then their farm transition team. It's where they'll actually go out and they'll sit down with families and try and hash out a plan to keep this way of life vital and going. So they're having a conference the 17th in Hiawatha, and I'm just going to give a talk about mental stress or mental health and just kind of how to get through the winter. Just some small little tips to put in your toolbox because this winter's tough. I mean, there's no way around it. Crop prices aren't where anybody wants them, and it's next year. Inputs haven't gone down at all either. So getting through this winter is going to be important. And there's just a lot of small, little, simple things that will really help. So, yep, I'll be in Hiawatha the 17th next week.
Awesome.
That's
Yep.
awesome being up there to Hiawatha. Wow.
Yeah. One thing I'll add on that, I do think I've really seen it over the last 5 years, maybe a little bit before that, 6 or 7 years. I think that ag community's done a lot to really raise issues of mental health awareness. All kinds of organizations and extensions doing a good job with that. And a bunch of them put together a website, Kansas Ag Stress. I just put a link to it in the chat.
Yep.
But they have a list there of what they call ag aware mental health providers. So if you do feel like you need therapy or something like that, there are people that understand agriculture because it isn't everybody that does for sure. So,
But yeah, it blows my mind because farmers are so meticulous with their equipment. I mean, we'll walk through blizzards to get livestock fed, but we're just not very good at taking care of ourselves, whether it's physically or mentally or just simple little things. So yes, mental health the last few years is we're getting there.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention or uh, express my appreciation for this. Thomas, going back to Eugene, my mother was born in Osage County, Oklahoma in 25. And so formative years during the Dust Bowl and Depression. And she actually shot herself in the head when she was 28, but she recovered. That was before I was born. And she was able to make a miraculous recovery. But after we moved out to the farm when I was 11, she had a very severe breakdown and had to have exorbitant amounts of electric shock treatments. And in the 70s, this was One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and it was just so voodoo. But I'm learning now that it was more common even back then than I realized. But for me, in a little country school, the comments that kids made because they didn't know, and the fear that radiates from that is definitely something that is a lifelong process to address. But fortunately, I was able to get therapy, that I at least grew up with enough exposure to know how important counseling is. And so really thankful for that. And then thankful also that medications become much more sophisticated by the 90s when she was only hospitalized for a month instead of a year, as she was when I was 11 out here. And so I really, there's there's a need for medications. I mean, there is a role, I should say. It's not always necessary, but it definitely can play a big role, and especially for people realizing how helpful they can be and important.
Right.
So thank you so much for
Yep.
getting this out.
Thank you for sharing that very much. Thank you.
We've got a comment down. I don't know if can you see them, Thomas? Are you able to read them?
Tip my phone over.
I can read it if it's.
Yeah, well, I'll end up tipping my phone over.
It's from Marilyn Logan. She says, "Thanks, Thomas, for the information. As one of those from your father's generations, I can understand their reactions. I struggle with recognizing that your generation views life much differently than I do."
Yep. Thank you very much for acknowledging that. There's common ground to be had. We're all here because we love agriculture. We love this way of life. So there's always common ground to be found. So thank you for that.
I think one of the things that I find valuable in learning this kind of stuff is how much, for instance, at my church, I had picked up with the women's committee because I wanted to do some volunteer work, and found somebody there who was interested in trying to help solve childhood hunger. And that's what that's how the connection to the Kansas Rural Center came into my life, because I signed up for a meeting on a website, and it was Paul Johnson was in that Zoom. But it made me aware that, and one of the things that might help people, farm communities where people are struggling with their I don't like to say mental health because they're not sick. Well, the problems is that I discovered through the sequence of events I just outlined there that the farm community has something to teach other people just by being who they are. That, just, in terms of the way, what their lives are about and how things work, that, like one of the first things that Paul Johnson said was something about the connection between food and water, and then there's that what the children need are fruits and vegetables, and it was simple but very enlightening. And the differences in our lives, we lose, we over, we abstract everything, and we lose what's valuable in those differences and the things that we can learn from special. It's a culture, the farm culture, that it has something to teach the rest of us.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, we're coming up on our hour here. Is there any final questions or comments?
Well, just a quick comment on the way a person may farm can also have its own stigmas attached to it. As I learned, being a certified organic crop farmer, and just really ostracized in the neighborhood for that, for the type of farming that I chose.
I've been wondering about that. I'd be interested in hearing your stories some, because like my
Okay.
neighborhood association, part of your contract when you in your mortgage is that you had to be in this neighborhood association, and the dues have gone from $25 to almost $200 a year, and they're mowing a big green space right across from me. And I haven't lived in close in country part of my life. I'm going, leave that stuff alone. I would like for it to just be what it is. But more than that, I'd like if we would decide, the neighborhood association would decide to have a community garden, and that we could actually learn things from the farmers about how to fill in the gaps in our budgets by having a community garden. How do we get there? I don't know, but it seems like it's kind of obvious in some ways.
Are you on the board of the HOA?
Oh,
That's a start.
they do their duty and inform us all, but I'm so busy trying to do this kind of community outreach. It's basically as part of the women's committee that we are trying to be of service, not just play bunco. Sorry, but yeah. So, and that's a commitment that changes your life, because it's about a lot of other people, and there's a lot you have to learn, discover. And so,
Right.
I should just go on the neighborhood forum and put it in there. Why don't we have a community garden?
Yeah, it's a start.
But people are still blowing the leaves off their lawns. It's going to be a big step for them.
I know. My neighbors do that out here in the country.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Well, thanks for
thanks so
joining us,
much, all.
everybody. Thanks, Thomas. That was really
Yeah.
great.
Yep.
Excellent.
Thank you very much for hosting. So good
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
It is good to know that you're out there doing that. I just think that's cheers me up.
Good
That's because you're on the right
Me
track
too.
there, and it's very person oriented, and that's what we got to do.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.